Now, maybe you're on your wild card ahead of Game Week 10, or maybe you just want to know what the best team in FPL looks like right now. Well, I've got you covered, and this team gets a 100% AI rating, and I'm going to take you through it in this video. All right, we're going to start off then by talking about the defence of the team. And I've got here some clean sheet projections courtesy of Solio. I'll leave a link in the description to Solio Analytics below. I think it's quite clear that Arsenal are the best defence. So, I mean, the story's pretty true for most of the season, but I would be picking an Arsenal defender on my wildcard team. So there's going to be an Arsenal defender in this team. Man City, Liverpool, Newcastle are the next three. I'm not sure I really, massively back the Man City and Liverpool defences. Newcastle, probably, but again, I'm just not massive on them. Other teams in there, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Bournemouth, Fulham and Everton. These are the kinds of teams that I'll be looking at because their defenders, on the most part, are a little bit cheaper as well. And I think this leads me on to, and I've made a load of videos this week, right, already. I've made a buy and avoid video, and I've spoken about my own team. And in both videos, I've used both of these graphics, right? Clean sheet odds and Palace defense. I know I'm reusing stuff in this video, but it's kind of truthful to how I'm feeling, right? My views on the players I want to bring into my team are going to be similar to my views on what the best wildcard team is. So I think you need a piece of the Crystal Palace defense. Personally, I think of the three best defenders in FPL, you've got Munoz, Gahey and Richards. My personal favourite right now is Mark Gahey. He seems to just have an edge on, well, certainly Chris Richards in terms of attacking set pieces, and he's not too bad for defensive contribution points. I think there's a good likelihood of some clean sheets coming up for Crystal Palace. Yeah, just in general, I think probably want to target the Crystal Palace defence. And it's all just how much budget you have. Obviously, Munoz is, 5.5 million, Mark Gahey 4.9, Chris Richards 4.5. Yeah, we go on to the defence. It's really just who you can afford. And in terms of who you can afford, I think there's almost a change in the demographic of FPL right now. What I've got here is the top defenders in the game that are priced 4.4 million and below, right? And we've got, I think, a list of, probably 4 million-ish defenders that are pickable. And I think, most people have got one of these in your team. But I actually think if you're on a wild card, there's no harm in having, 2 of these guys. So, in my opinion, Alderete's, he's flagged at the moment, and obviously Mukiele is ahead of him in terms of points. I really like Mukiele, and I really like Joe Rodon. So, that kind of gives you a view of the defence. So, definitely want a bit of Arsenal, definitely want a bit of Crystal Palace, and I also think you could probably have a couple of these, 4 million or so defenders. So, this is what I've gone for. So, starting in Game Week 10, we've got David Raya and Gabriel, Mukiele alongside Mark Gahey. And on the bench is Joe Rodon and Senesi. I've got Krupa Jr. on the bench. We'll talk about him in a second. But yeah, I think this is a pretty strong defence. And I just don't see why you'd need another 4.5 million defender when there are so many good, cheap defenders in the game, right? And it's not exactly a groundbreaking thing to say, I can't imagine. But if I was on a wildcard, I think I'd just pick Rodon and Mukiele, to be honest. I think you could fairly comfortably start them most weeks. Like Joe Rodon has Nottingham Forest away next week. Mukiele's got Everton at home this week. I just think with the 5 defenders you've got in this team, you can chop and change them around quite flexibly. So yeah, I really like this defence, comprising of 2 dirt cheap defenders with Mark Gahey, Gabriel and Senesi. And I think David Raya is probably the best keeper in the game. The only thing I don't necessarily like about David Raya is he doesn't necessarily rack up the saves points, but with just how good Arsenal are defensively, he's going to get a load of clean sheets. And I guess the question is, if I've only got 2 Arsenal defenders, that means there's probably another Arsenal player in this team. There's an open question, and we'll get to it, I suppose, when we review the team as a whole at the end of the video. There's an open question, I guess, as to whether it's worth having double Arsenal defence and an attacker, or just triple Arsenal defence with how good they are at the moment and not bother with an attacker. So that's something we'll go through later on. I'll actually go straight into the midfield, and then I'll talk about some alternative options that you might want to have alongside these. But I think, on the most part, most people, if you watch my channel, could predict that I'm picking these players. Saka, I think, is probably the best Arsenal attacker, so I've gone for him. But again, it does beg the question, 10 million, is he giving you £10 million worth of value? yeah, I don't know. Just a question, but I think he's the best Arsenal attacker at the moment. Bruno Fernandes, some people hate him, some people love him. For me, he's just got so many routes to points. Man United are picking up form again. Obviously, 3 wins on the bounce for them now. And I think Bruno Fernandes, just with, well, I said it already, how many routes he has to points. He plays every game for 90 minutes, takes set pieces and penalties, gets defcons. The guy is just, yeah, he's got so many routes to points. And I think the fixtures for Man United coming up are pretty decent as well. I think there's some points from attacking returns in there for him as well. I've gone for Ismaila Sarr. I'll talk about an alternative in a second. I just think Palace's fixtures are really good, and he's off to a very good start to the season in terms of his attacking potential and open play attacking returns. It's just whether he's not on set pieces. It's just whether you back him from open play or you want to pick, a penalty or set piece taker instead. Semenyo, I think you've got to have Semenyo in your team, haven't you, with the form that he's in this season and how well Bournemouth seem to be playing. Even though he's got Manchester City away up next, I think he's a great option. Aston Villa and then West Ham after that for him. I think those are good fixtures. And then Iliman Ndiaye is basically a mini Bruno Fernandes, playing on the right wing for Everton. He gets less of the ball than Bruno Fernandes does, but whenever he gets the ball, he seems to be really impactful and effective with it. And also, he's on penalties. He'll play every game, probably for 90 minutes because Everton aren't in Europe. His defensive contributions aren't quite as good as Bruno Fernandes, but at the same time, he's still racking up some decent numbers. So that would be my midfield 5, but there are definitely some alternatives. Number 1 would be Bryan Mbeumo. Now, Man United, I spoke about Man United when I spoke about Bruno Fernandes. They obviously seem to be finding a bit of rhythm now under Amorim, and I don't think it's outrageous to say that Bryan Mbeumo definitely looks better from open play in terms of getting attacking returns than Bruno Fernandes does. And he's probably, I wouldn't say he's not the talisman, but he's the main goal scoring threat, I'd say, for United at the moment. 5 fixtures coming up are not bad at all. I've just bigged up Crystal Palace, but Forest away, Tottenham away, but they can still score against Tottenham, I think. Everton, Palace and West Ham, it's good games. He is overperforming his XG a little bit, but at the same time, I think he is just a player that does that with how good he is at finishing. The only thing is, obviously, he doesn't take penalties for United, so you're getting a player for 8.2 million that you're solely reliant on open play returns from. But, the form that Man United are in, the fixtures that they've got, I certainly think he's capable of getting some open play returns in the coming weeks. And yeah, I really like him as an option. I think he's decent. And, looking back at the midfield, who could you bring him in for? Maybe Saka, maybe even as Bruno Fernandes as an alternative if you want to save a bit of cash. Or obviously Semenyo is a similar price. Another one I really like, and I spoke about Ismaila Sarr not taking set pieces and relying on open play attacking returns. I do really quite like Enzo Fernandez because he isn't reliant on open play attacking returns solely, particularly when Cole Palmer isn't in the team. He's going to be Chelsea's main set piece and penalty taker. So he's got penalties up until we get Cole Palmer back. 6.7 million, he's put up some decent numbers this season, 5 attacking returns from 8 appearances, underperformed his XG as well, so he should be on 4 goals as opposed to 3. So yeah, all of that in mind, I think he's a perfectly decent option as well. I've gone for Ismaila Sarr because he's a little bit cheaper, and I just think the Palace's fixtures may be a little bit better. But I say that, but I'm looking at Tottenham away, which is a bit difficult, but then Wolves, Burnley and Leeds in the next 5 for Enzo Fernandez, albeit around Arsenal at home. The fixtures do look good. And yeah, I think Enzo Fernandez, Bryan Mbeumo, perfectly decent alternatives to the midfielders I've picked. Looking up front, I think it's given that Erling Haaland's going to be in this team, so I'm not even going to talk about him in this video. He's in the team. Alongside Haaland, I think the next best striker is probably Mateta, isn't it? Let's be honest. Palace, I've bigged up their defence, I've bigged up Ismaila Sarr, and I've got to big up Mateta at the same time, I think, haven't I? 5 goals from 9 games, obviously a blank against Arsenal, but Arsenal away, you can erase that from your memory with how good they are defensively. But 7.8 expected goals. I mean, this was the narrative last week and the week before. He's underperformed his expected goals data and still had a decent start to the season. The fixtures coming up are good. Brentford, Brighton, Wolves, Man United, Burnley. They're all decent fixtures. And he's underperforming his data. So that suggests that he should, in this next run of games, if he aligns to his XG, he should have an absolute bagload of goals. And I've got a feeling he is the Crystal Palace penalty taker, right? Without Eze in the fold now, there's no sharing of penalty duty or whatever. He is the penalty taker. So what you've got here is a pretty nailed on sort of talismanic striker for Palace, and he takes penalties. Now, I've bigged up the Crystal Palace players, but the only thing I would say is European football. And that could eat into their minutes as one, but also, I think I've seen it already this season. They don't really have a lot of rotation options, do Crystal Palace? So these players are having to play, when Europe's involved, twice a week. So it's not a case of them potentially getting rested, it's a case of them playing tired. So I think, we get more European football mixed in, which I think is coming again next week. There's cup games this week as well. It's just all a little bit messy with how tired I think these players could be. That's the only worry I have with Crystal Palace, is just players' tiredness. But Mateta, I think, is the first choice 9 for Palace. Obviously, he's got Nketiah providing some competition and some goals off the bench. That's the only kind of doubt about Mateta. But for me, I think he's a great option and he'll be in this wildcard team. I had him on the bench, but Krupi Jr., I think he's 4.6 million at the moment, so forgive that slight mistake. I think he's 4.6. You're not going to start this guy every week, but I think he's the perfect bench option. You've got a striker at basically the minimum price, who I think is going to be starting for Bournemouth now. Like, the performances he's put in the couple of games he has started in place of Evan Nilsson have been so good that I think Evan Nilsson's going to struggle to get his place back in the team. And yeah, I just think, Evan Nilsson's out, first of all. And yeah, this guy is playing better than he is. So I think he may well become the first choice Bournemouth striker. He's massively overperformed his XG, is the only thing I would say. But then, obviously, Evan Nilsson has not had that many chances created for him at Bournemouth either. Yeah, I really like Krupi Jr. And I'm not getting carried away with him, right? I'm not going to start him every week. I'm not saying he's the best thing since sliced bread or whatever. What I am saying is you've got a minimum price forward who's currently starting up front for Bournemouth. You can stick him on your bench or play him in certain weeks when other players have got tough fixtures. And we just go back to Enzo Fernandez, for example, in, what would that be, Gameweek 11, 12, 13 with Arsenal at home. Perfect opportunity to bring in Krupi Jr. for Sunderland away if he's still in the team, for example. So I think the rotation works quite nicely. So this is what the team looks like then. So we've got Raya in goal, Gabriel, Mukiele, Gehi, Saka, Bruno Fernandes, Ismaila Sarr, Semenyo, Njai, and then Haaland and Mateta up front. Bench of Dubravka, Rodon, Senesi, and Krupi Jr. I think that's a pretty strong wildcard team. I've had a little bit of stick in the comments because the Solio data still has Salah as the top expected points player. But I don't necessarily agree with that, with what I've seen from Liverpool so far this season. But what I do like is the rest of the players on this list. Haaland, Saka, Fernandes, Gabriel. I don't have Gakpo. I'm still not massively keen on Liverpool, to be honest. Ismaila Sarr, Mbeumo, Mateta. These are all kinds of players that are in the, in the shortlist or actually in this wildcard team. So this is kind of I just put this in basically to show the pickable pool of players at the moment and some potential. You could have Cunha as well if you wanted. I think Mbeumo's better, but Cunha, he's doing okay for United as well, isn't he? So, final scores on the doors with this team then. We've just gone through it, but it gets 70 predicted points in game week 10. The team value is a little high at 101.2 million, but there are a couple of really easy ways I think you can reduce that. Number one, I think, is downgrading Saka. You could just think someone like Mbeumo will do very reasonably similar to Saka. So you could do that, and that immediately gets you 2 million. Basically 2 million. You could swap Gehi out for Chris Richards, Gabriel down to Timber, Raya to an alternative goalkeeper. You can even go for the, Sunderland keeper Roof if you wanted to. So there are a couple of alternatives around with this team, but I think most people should be able to afford this draft. I think most people watching this video will have the core bunch of players here that have risen in value the most, so your team value is protected and you can buy it. Like I said, we've got Senesi on the bench as well at 5 million. If you wanted to, you could just pick Anderson and have him on the bench and just wait for him to come back from injury, or any other, Michael Keane, any other 4.5 million defender will do just fine there. So it is a little expensive, this team, but there are many easy ways you can find yourself some funds. And I'd be surprised if, I don't think there'll be too many people, strapped for cash to afford this team. And of course, like I said in the intro, Fantasy Football Hub give it a 100% AI rating, and you can check out Fantasy Football Hub using the link at the top of the description below. Alright, well that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. I just think it's a good idea to do a weekly wildcard video, basically, because some weeks it's obviously going to be the same, but it just sort of follows the kind of meta of FPL in terms of the structure of your team, the players you want to pick, etc, etc. And even if you're not on your wildcard, I think this is a useful video because, well, for me it's useful because I always like to have in my mind what the best current team in FPL is and always try not to stay like stray too far away from that, if that makes sense. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, leave us a like rating. Let me know in the comments, well, if you'd make any changes to this team. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Golden Goal channel. It should be just there on your screen. And yeah, thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.